before modern corporations crossed continents, before oil giants and tech platforms reached valuations with 12 zeros, there was an empire so vast, profitable, and woven into global trade that historians still struggle to measure its full economic weight. It was not a single company, a single monarch, or even a single island nation acting alone. It was the British Empire, a worldwide system of colonies, ports, armies, banks, ships, plantations, factories, and trade routes that became in many ways the original trillion-dollar empire. At its height, it ruled roughly a quarter of the world's land and a vast share of its people. But its power did not appear overnight. It rose through ambition, warfare, commerce, technology, and the relentless pursuit of strategic advantage. To understand its expansion, we begin with a country once far from the center of world power. In the late Middle Ages, England was not an obvious candidate for global dominance. It was a kingdom on Europe's edge, smaller and poorer than powers like France and Spain, divided by struggles over territory, religion, and succession. Its merchants looked outward, but its reach was limited. Then the world changed. In the late 15th and early 16th centuries, European voyages opened sea routes to the Americas, Africa, and Asia. Spain and Portugal built the first great overseas empires. American gold and silver poured into Europe. Spices, silk, sugar, tobacco, and enslaved labor transformed commerce. England arrived later, but learned quickly. Its first steps mixed piracy, trade, and colonization. English privateers raided Spanish ships. Explorers searched for routes to Asia. Merchants formed joint stock companies, pooling money to fund risky voyages for potential profit. This was one of the empire's key innovations. Expansion did not depend only on the crown. It depended on investors, merchants, chartered companies, and financial institutions. Empire became a business model. In 1600, Queen Elizabeth I granted a charter to the English East India Company. It began as a trading company competing in the spice trade of the Indian Ocean. Over time, it became a corporate empire with armies, diplomats, tax systems, and territories. Around the same period, English settlers established Atlantic colonies. Jamestown was founded in Virginia in 1607. Plymouth followed in 1620. These settlements were fragile, often brutal, and dependent on indigenous land, labor, and knowledge. But they became beachheads for a growing Atlantic empire. The early empire was messy, violent, and experimental. Some colonies failed, some ventures went bankrupt. Rivals fought for the same coastlines, islands, and trade routes. Britain's advantage grew from connecting many pieces into one system. In the Caribbean, colonies produced sugar, among the most valuable commodities of the early modern world, on plantations reliant on the forced labor of enslaved Africans. The human cost was catastrophic, and the profits enormous. In North America, colonies produced tobacco, timber, furs, and later cotton and grain. In West Africa, British traders participated heavily in the slave trade. In India and Asia, merchants pursued textiles, tea, spices, porcelain, and opium. British ships tied these regions together. This was not just conquest. It was a global supply chain. Ships carried manufactured goods from Britain to Africa, enslaved people from Africa to the Americas, and plantation products back to Europe. Other routes connected Britain to India, China, the Mediterranean, and the Pacific. Ports became nodes in a network of extraction and exchange. The empire's rise was also linked to war. During the 17th and 18th centuries, Britain fought the Dutch, French, Spanish, and others for control of trade and territory. Naval power became central. Whoever controlled the sea could move troops, protect merchants, blockade enemies, and claim distant colonies. Britain invested heavily in its navy. Its island geography, shipyards, sailors, merchants, and financiers created a maritime machine able to project force across oceans. The 7 Years' War, from 1756 to 1763, was a turning point, with fighting in Europe, North America, the Caribbean, West Africa, and India. Britain emerged with Canada, a stronger position in India, and expanded influence over global trade. But empire produced resistance. In North America, British attempts to tax and control colonies after the war helped trigger the American Revolution. In 1776, 13 colonies declared independence. Britain had lost a major part of its first empire. Yet the loss redirected expansion. Britain turned more aggressively toward Asia, the Pacific, Africa, and new forms of commercial power. The empire adapted. It increasingly depended on India, global finance, industrial production, and naval dominance. India became the jewel of the empire. The East India Company's power expanded after the Battle of Plassey in 1757, when company forces gained decisive influence in Bengal, one of the world's richest regions. Over decades, the company conquered, negotiated, taxed, and absorbed territories across the subcontinent. A private company ruled millions of people, collected revenue, maintained armies, and shaped local economies for imperial benefit. Indian wealth helped finance British expansion. while Indian textiles, raw materials, and markets became central to imperial trade. But company rule also produced famine, exploitation, corruption, and rebellion. In 1857, a major uprising shook the empire. It was brutally suppressed, and in 1858, the British crown took direct control of India. From then on, India was ruled as the British Raj. By the 19th century, Britain entered a new phase, powered by the Industrial Revolution. Factories, coal, steam engines, railways, iron ships, and telegraph cables changed what empire could do. Steamships shortened travel times. Railways moved goods inland. Telegraph lines let officials and merchants communicate across continents in hours instead of months. The empire became faster, tighter, and more profitable. Britain also became the workshop of the world, producing textiles, machinery, weapons, and manufactured goods at unprecedented scale. Colonies supplied raw materials and bought finished products. This relationship was often unequal. Imperial policies could weaken local industries while opening colonial markets to British goods. Money was another engine. London became a center of global finance. Banks, insurers, investors, and trading houses funded ships, railways, mines, plantations, and governments. Even where Britain did not formally rule, British capital created influence. Financial dependence could be as powerful as direct conquest. So the British Empire was more than a map colored red. It was formal colonies, informal influence, military bases, trade agreements, debt, migration, language, law, and infrastructure. Its expansion reached Australia, where British colonization began in 1788 with penal settlements and grew into settler colonies built on the dispossession of Aboriginal peoples. It reached New Zealand, where treaties, settlement, and conflict reshaped Maori lands and sovereignty. It reached the Caribbean, Canada, Southern Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific. In Africa, Britain's role expanded dramatically in the 19th century. During the scramble for Africa, European powers carved up much of the continent. Britain took territories from Egypt and Sudan to Kenya, Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, and beyond. Strategic geography mattered. Control of Egypt and the Suez Canal gave Britain a faster route to India and Asia. Bases at Gibraltar, Malta, Aden, Singapore, and Hong Kong protected shipping lanes. The empire was built around choke points where trade, military movement, and influence could be controlled. By the early 20th century, it reached its greatest territorial extent. It included self-governing dominions like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa, crown colonies and protectorates, India, islands, ports, cables, coaling stations, and commercial networks scattered across the globe. The numbers were staggering, but the real power was connection. A merchant in London could insure a ship carrying tea from Asia. A railway could move raw materials from inland mines to coastal ports. A telegraph message could adjust prices or report rebellion. A naval squadron could appear where British interests were threatened. This was global power before globalization had a modern name. But every empire carries contradictions. Britain presented itself as a force for order, trade, law, and progress. It built railways, ports, schools, courts, and administrative systems. Yet these systems often served extraction and control. Railways moved goods to ports more efficiently than they served local needs. Laws protected imperial property more than local rights. Education created opportunity, but also reinforced imperial authority. Military force remained the final guarantee. Resistance was constant. Enslaved people rebelled. Indigenous communities fought dispossession. Indian rulers, soldiers, peasants, and intellectuals challenged imperial rule. African kingdoms resisted conquest. Workers organized. Nationalists published newspapers, formed parties, and demanded self-government. Across the empire, people adapted to British power, negotiated with it, profited from it, suffered under it, and fought against it. The empire created wealth, but not evenly. Britain gained extraordinary advantages, while many colonized societies experienced extraction, disruption, and violence. The legacy remains visible in borders, languages, legal systems, migration patterns, wealth gaps, and political conflicts. The decline of this trillion-dollar empire came from the same forces that made it possible: war, finance, technology, and resistance. 2 world wars exhausted Britain. Maintaining global dominance became too expensive. The United States and Soviet Union emerged as superpowers. Anti-colonial movements gained strength. Colonized peoples demanded independence not as a gift, but as a right. India and Pakistan became independent in 1947. Across Asia, Africa, the Caribbean, and the Pacific, independence followed. Some transitions were negotiated. Others were marked by violence, partition, emergency rule, or civil conflict. Piece by piece, formal empire dissolved.